live stream 23, and this is going to be over the possible Russian invasion of Ukraine. I know we've already done a couple live streams that have introduced this topic, but man, I'm telling you guys, it seems more and more likely. So I was definitely one of the guys in the beginning that was like, no, they're not going to invade. You know, they're just having a big military exercise, show of force, you know, maybe score some political points. But I don't know, man, they're massive, pretty good. And it looks like it's about to kick off. So with that being said, I got our usual suspects in here. I'm going to go around the horn and introduce everybody. And hopefully we have a nice little lively discussion over, is Russia going to invade Ukraine? And if it does, what is that going to look like? And then what is Ukraine going to do? Because obviously it's David versus Goliath kind of war here. So going around the horn, we got Les with Pegasus Tests on YouTube. Les is a veteran of Desert Storm, served in the Marine Corps in the early 90s, obviously. He's got his own YouTube channel. Be sure to check him out. Also has his own training company and always brings a wealth of knowledge to the live stream. Thanks for coming on tonight, Les.
Glad to be here.
Next, got my good buddy Chad. Chad and I go way back, served together in Bravo 123 in Afghanistan, Helmand Province, 2011, 2012 time frame. Wealth of knowledge, studying on his military history doctorate, and always brings a great perspective. He definitely does a hell of a lot more research than we do in this live stream. So welcome to the chat tonight, bud. All right, no stranger to this YouTube channel. We got Bruce at Camp Armament. That is his YouTube handle. That is his Instagram. That is also his gay porn name. No, I'm kidding.
OnlyFans.
But yeah, be sure to check out his YouTube channel, guys. Again, he's no stranger to my YouTube channel. He's essentially my right-hand man, helps me out all the time with multiple videos. He brings our civilian perspective to this chat. He was an aircraft mechanic. He's a armorer, does a lot of Cerakoting work. He just brings a great perspective, and definitely Ukraine and Russia are a very passionate subject for him. So thanks for coming on tonight, brother. All right, last but not least, we got Dr. Christopher Larson. He is an accomplished author. He's written many books on small unit tactics. He's the founder of the One Shepherd Leadership Institute, going 40 years strong. And he does have his own YouTube channel, which you guys need to check out, called Christopher Larson. Very original. But once again, guys, he's just a wealth of knowledge. And if you've watched any of these live streams, you surely have picked up on that. So good, doctor. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me back.
And what was your real gay porn name?
Sebastian Summers.
All right, guys. That is our panel tonight. So without further ado, let's kick it over to Pegasus Test.
Gee, what a surprise.
You got the comment.
I was like you, Bren. I kind of thought, nah, he's not going to really do it. And then I got to the point, goes, well, if he does this, he's just going to move up one more river line, just get a little more territory so he can have that overland route to Crimea. Now it looks like he's sized up our president and decided, screw it, I'm going for the whole enchilada. And you can't really blame him, because if he is going to do it, now is the time. I can't think of any time in more recent history that would have been better than right now. And there's a clock ticking that the longer he waits, his window of opportunity is going to close. I do find it interesting, of all places, I was watching CNN last night. The Ukrainians are taking it very seriously. They're giving everybody training up to and including like 79-year-old grandmothers. So the Ukrainians seem to think it's going to happen, if nothing else. Go on, Doc. You got to have something here to follow.
No, I do. I was pondering your last point there, that the Ukrainians think it's going to happen. I've actually been more surprised by the Ukrainians' rather cavalier attitude towards this whole thing, up until maybe just the last few days, where reporting now, and you you hear them saying, okay, I'm coming up with plan A, or, with a plan B and a plan C now. They're talking about financial plans and prepper. And as we said, in recent week or so, we've seen, civilians training. And I'm not even talking militia stuff here. We're talking about people training to defend their own homes, their own businesses and structures. So it seems like they're taking note. But for me, one of the things to do is watch what's going on with the man on the street, right? And maybe that's a false metric. Maybe I shouldn't do that. You know me, I love analogies. So one day we were out there in this is One Shepherd way back in the day. This is early 1990s or 80s, right? I'm still in high school, and we had this kid come up from like somebody's cousin, joined us out there in One Shepherd. And we're doing patrolling. And this kid was from Florida, and he was deathly afraid of snakes. Apparently, Florida just doesn't have that many snakes, at least not on the beach where this kid was going, right? And he's going on and on about snakes. And we're like, come on, dude, there's snakes out here, but they'll leave you alone. It's not that big of a deal. So I remember we were sitting there eating chow. Maybe it was at the end of the FTX or something like this. And somebody talked about, I got to go to Florida and this, that, and the other thing. And of course, you make the invariable Jaws joke, the shark's going to eat you and stuff. And he kind of looks and he laughs and he's like, what's with all you guys from the Midwest? Sharks are just something that happens out there. I mean, it's no big deal. It's just another fish. And we're like, yeah, it's a fish that'll eat you. And he's like, pretty much all fish eat all fish. There's fish that eat sharks, right? And I'm like, wait, what? And this kid's just like super chill about sharks, but he's deathly afraid of snakes. And, I started to realize it's the environment you're in. We killed snakes with our boots. We shot them with BB guns. I mean, yeah, they're a thing, but you're just not overly, I don't know anybody that's ever been killed by a snake. But the idea of swimming into the ocean to this very day, I can't do that without hearing that bass cello in the back going, dun-dum, 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 and so I guess it's about your perspective. And so this is what I'm saying. Maybe as chill as the Ukrainians have been over the last month or two, may not be the best metric because this is so commonplace for them. They like they said, we're not getting invaded. We were already invaded. We were invaded in 2014. Guys, this is our life. And so it's got to take a whole lot of, I guess, pressure or signs. I don't know what do they read tea leaves or what, but now all of a sudden, here in the last week or so, they're sitting up and paying attention. And so maybe we all should be.
Yeah, and so sometimes, I'm trying to figure it out a bit myself, and I kind of enjoy sitting in the weekend warrior chair and watching it from afar because I can get kind of that bird's eye view, I guess. And my opinions don't really matter. There's no lives depending on what I think. But I do kind of wonder, do they feel like Poland did? I mentioned this in some text comments earlier, but I always love the scene from The Pianist where they're reading the paper and it says the Germans are coming and they're sitting around the dinner table and they're like, that'll never happen. And then in the next scene, the Germans are driving through their town, right? Is it just kind of shock factor that, knowing that Russia could roll through any number of countries over there just simply because of their sheer size and military might. And no matter what amount of resistance the country put up, Russia could take over that country. Now, long term, using partisan type tactics, that's might be a different story. But from a conventional warfare stance, simply looking at little green men on a sand table, Russia can do what they want to do. I think that for me, one of the more interesting things is to watch what the Western world, led by the United States, is doing. And essentially, the Western world is saying, we're not doing nothing. And the United States is really only saying, we're not doing anything either, short of getting really mad when you invade Ukraine and placing economic sanctions on your country. That alone, though, may be enough, because Russia doesn't have a great economy. Russia's got a shitty economy right now. Their inflation rate's really bad. And that can be, I guess for a country like Russia, for a third world country, that almost doesn't matter because they're already third world. Russia's not third world, and the people could definitely turn against the government if they're not careful, right? But the real question is economic sanctions on a country that's already sort of struggling economically enough to deter them from long-term goals of annexing or invading a country that was once theirs, like Ukraine? I'm not sure we know the answer to that. I almost feel like we as the United States are we're just pushing right up to the line, playing this game that we're not going to say that militarily will defend Ukraine, because I think that would be a game changer. I think that then it would be game over for Russia. But we're simply saying, no, we won't do that. But we're only going to threaten to do enough that might convince them not to move forward. And honestly, my wife was asking me, and she doesn't really keep up with all this. She's like, what are the chances, do you think, after all of this talk? 3 days ago, the U.S. government saying, oh, they're definitely invading and it's happening this week. This is a done deal. What are the chances that you think there are that Russia's going to invade Ukraine? And honestly, I told him probably about 3 out of 10. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I have my doubts too. I've kind of thought from the beginning that this may be just a ploy to push NATO and see kind of how we'll react. If anything, Russia has a history of strategic and tactical deception. They call it Maskirovka. Some of you Russians in the chat can kick my ass if I pronounce that incorrectly, but I think this may be part of a bigger ploy, maybe political warfare. But I will say I agree with everything that's been said about Ukraine. I'm kind of shocked. They're training the population for war. I mean, for their standpoint, it may be total war. For those of you who don't know what total war is, that's the entire population's involved. It's economic, it's political, it's physical, it's electronic, kind of no distinction between military and civilian. And I think that's kind of the direction they've taken. I think they're kind of chilled about it because they've been under the Iron Curtain since the revolution. They've been under the Russian jackboots ever since 1917. So I don't think this is a shock to them. And like Doc said, you know, what was that, 2014? They took Crimea. So I mean, they're used to this. Again, I have my doubts if this will actually even happen or not. This may just be, let me just kind of poke the bear, see what happens, and then we'll pull back and assess from there. So
I want to jump in and say, you know, it's funny because you got the U.S. and other NATO allies and everybody, like Bruce already said, everybody's already saying like, no, there ain't no U.S. troops or NATO troops going into Ukraine to back them up, right? But what they are offering are sanctions, right? Oh, we're going to hit you with all these, you know, crazy and wild sanctions. And, you know, you had I think it was the Russian ambassador to like Sweden pretty much said, you know, Vladimir Putin doesn't give a shit about sanctions. We've been sanctioned so many times. Like we're actually benefiting from it. Like we're making our own stuff. Right. So it's like the talk of sanctions and everything is kind of cheap because the Russians, man, you hear about that all the time. I mean, fuck, they banned the importation of Russian AKs for crying out loud and Russian ammunition. I mean, what else are they going to ban from Russia? Freaking caviar. I mean, golly, they don't care. They don't care. They're going to do whatever they want. And if Putin wants to invade Ukraine, he's going to do it, whether sanctions get put on him or not. So
that's a great point, Brent, because I'd remind everybody, look at history, is when everybody was mad at South Africa for having an apartheid government, everybody sanctioned the shit out of South Africa. It didn't matter in the end. You know, South Africa stopped being apartheid because South Africans decided it would. It's nothing the outside world did. You know, whether those sanctions had been there or not really didn't make a whole lot of difference. And I think what you're hitting on, Bren, is exactly right. I think at this point, Putin doesn't give a crap about sanctions.
All right. So, I mean, I think he does, and here's why. Okay, so I've been trying to piece this together for so long, this whole thing. And, you know, I saw the earlier comment that, oh, this is all just America saber rattling, to save face, from the withdrawal of Afghanistan and Biden's son and the longest non-invasion. No, the longest non-invasion would probably have been Poland and Czechoslovakia for the Sudetenland, and then the phony war afterwards. So it's up there. But here's the thing. What happened a week or so ago at the Olympics, I think, and during that time, during the opening events of the Olympics, I don't know if you guys know this, but Putin went to China and he signed an agreement, an economic agreement for China to buy Russian oil and gas. And I think for the first time, I started piecing together a possible, because I'm going to be honest, guys, I'm not kidding. This didn't make sense to me. I didn't know who was posturing and who was saber rattling. So let me throw this at you. Let me throw this at you guys, and we'll kick it around. In 2021, the crack forms, okay? China was under global pressure for its COVID virus, and, that was made I agree, it was made in a lab, right? And so they start their revanchism rhetoric towards Taiwan. And so China's under the microscope. Russia was under economic pressure for involvement in Ukraine and Crimea still. And the U.S. withdraws from Afghanistan, signaling American political and military weakness. Now, I mean, that's a real problem for us. So maybe this is our, administration shoring up its alliance with NATO, saying, hey, we've got to do something for that, for Ukraine. Possibly. But here's what happens this year so far. We're only 6 weeks into this year. Russia just signs a purchase pact with China for Russian oil and gas. China is less impacted by U.S. sanctions, and Russia is less impacted by EU sanctions. And let me tell you that China has a long history of defying U.S. sanctions anyway. They did this for North Korea. They do it regularly in Iran. They do it in Venezuela. Now, Russia, likewise, has a recent history of revanchism. They invaded Chechnya, Georgia, Crimea, and Ukraine. All right? So if this is all right, if I'm trying to say, okay, what is it that Russia wants? And I think what they want is, first off, they want Crimea under Russian control. More so than anything, they need that. And then they also need a Ukraine that's isolated from NATO alliance in the event of a Russian, attack or expansion into that. They don't want NATO coming to their aid. What does Russia need? Well, it needs an economic market for its oil and gas and its products and services. And it needs the U.S. and NATO to blink first here. Really, they need us to blink first so that we back down from the brink of war. Fine. What does China want? China wants Taiwan under Chinese control. China wants the South China Sea, the Pacific under Chinese control. What do they need to get that? Well, they need a strategic partner in the Pacific with a credible blue water navy. And Russia can provide that. Then they also need a reprieve from global political scrutiny to prepare for a U.S.-Japan, to prepare to counter the U.S.-Japan-South Korean alliance with Taiwan. And so what I'm going to suggest here is maybe China nor Russia really want war, but they can still win even without war, because this is a test of U.S. and NATO political military resolve. China can literally sit back and say, how does U.S. and NATO deal with Russia? And that's a good indicator for China of how, U.S. allies are going to respond in the Pacific. So I think this is testing the waters, possibly. And that's about the best I can come out of it, because I can't really believe that anybody wants to go to World War III. What do you guys think?
I agree. I mean, that's what I said earlier. This could be just a test, just to kind of see how we react. I completely agree. I think that's kind of the direction they're headed. Historically, Russia's always had some kind of, deceptive plan here, and this may be part of it. So that's kind of where I'm inclined to go as well.
Yeah, I tell you, I see a lot of comments here where they're talking about, Russia doesn't want war, the U.S. wants war. What bad vodka are y'all drinking? We don't have military troops anywhere. All right. Whatever potatoes that came from, send them back and stop drinking that stuff. All right. We do not have a large military force gathered on any border. And I'm going to tell you, not even just that, I'm not defending the U.S. I don't, maybe you don't understand how the United States works today. But we are not the United States of World War II. We have a strong military and we have good generals. I do believe that. But they can't do shit without the voters of the country allowing them to do it. And if you knew what kind of voters that we have in this country and have had for a while, there's no way we're going to get involved in a conventional war with a country like Russia. We couldn't even win one with a bunch of rag-wearing, uneducated people in the Middle East that don't even have a government. And I mean that. And that's not because of our troops. Our troops could have won that war easy. We could have marched through there and taken any of those countries that we wanted with ease. And initially we did, but we couldn't stay in the fight because the voters won't allow us to stay in the fight. The way that this country works is that our government truly is a representative of the people. And when the people go and vote and say, hey, we've lost 13,000 troops, that's too many. Guys, we could lose 13,000 troops against a conventional war in Russia in a matter of a month. So there's no way that we are going to get involved in some kind of war with Russia. It's just not going to happen. And it's not a matter of our military might being able to or not being able to. We don't even get there because the U.S. people are not going to support it.
See, and I think that's it, Bruce. I think that's what happened when we pulled out in the debacle, the shame and the debacle, the humiliation of pulling out of Afghanistan, but more so than that, the violation of trust of our allies. America looked weak. And I agree with you. It's not really the military we're talking about. We're talking about our national leaders. Come on, we have a bunch of spineless, greedy, backstabbing national leaders, and our president suffers from a wicked case of dementia. And again, I'm not making fun. That's not a joke. I've said this before on this show. My father died of this. It's not a funny thing to me. It's not funny, and I don't wish it on people, but Biden clearly has dementia. And so he's not a strong leader. And his administration is just spineless and greedy. I mean, what else are you going to say about this? If China and Russia are reading, the winds correctly, if they're doing their forecast correctly, they surely know that not only are we weak, but by pulling out of Afghanistan, every one of our allies is once bitten, twice shy. They do not believe America is there to help them because we don't have strong leadership. So I think this is a test of our resolve, and for that, but the weakness can invite violence, and so that's my biggest fear, is that because America is weak, politically weak, and our resolve is weak socially, that's what this has happened before, but come on, that was the whole point of Japan attacking in Pearl Harbor, was that they perceived that same weakness. You're saying, oh yeah, but look what happened. Yes, they attacked the American people and the American people rose up. But, Taiwan and Ukraine aren't the American people. So I don't know. I'm actually very concerned about it. But again, they don't even have to take Taiwan and Ukraine right now. They don't. They can be playing a long game. Still, seems like it's right for the taking.
Well, why not right now? Now's a really good time. If I was the Chinese, the minute Vlad steps over the border, if he does, I'd load up the ships and head to Taiwan. They would literally be fools not to do it if they have it in their mind, because literally every day, 3 days after the invasion of Ukraine, China's chances at Taiwan actually start to go down. The minute the Russians do it, the Chinese have to do it, no matter what, because that's the best opportunity for success.
And with a Russian Navy, that's the Achilles heel of China, is they have a big land army, a capable Air Force, but they don't have, the blue water Navy that they need right now. Well, last year they did some war games around Japan, and it was China on one side and Russian Navy on the other side, actually completely encircling Japan, and it rattled Tokyo, rightfully so. So yeah, you're right. That's the piece of the pie, or that's the piece of the puzzle, I should say, that China's missing, and Russia can provide it.
Well, not only that, not to go down too far of a rabbit hole, but recently the British sent a carrier strike group all the way to the Pacific to cruise off the coast of China. If the Russians are in Ukraine, none of those European allies are going to send a thing to Asia. So it then becomes just a U.S.-Japanese thing. I mean, you can say the Australians and the New Zealanders, but they ain't got crap to contribute. It comes down to Japan and the USA. And you know what? Look at Japan. They got good quality equipment. Not so sure about them as a fighting force. They haven't been tested for a while. That's an unknown quantity.
South Korea will help, but you see your point, though.
Yeah, South Korea will help. And I've long said that if anything kicks off between the North and the South Koreans can handle it themselves. They'll just need a little logistic support from us at the most. But if they're spending all their time dealing with Kim Jong-fatso, they don't have any forces to contribute to fight China.
Yes, South Korea can help, but we need to make sure there's no cameras there to film it.
I want to put this food for thought. I think it would be a major political win for Putin if he doesn't invade. Because if you think about this, they've held these massive, let's put it face value, just war games, massive war games on the border, right? You had all the major Western powers saying they're invading any day now. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And all along, Putin and his ambassadors have been saying, nope, it's just a war game. It's just a war game. And then think about after all of this, everybody's pulling their people out of Ukraine and everything else. They say, all right, war games are over. We're going home. See?
That's what I agree with that. I agree with that, Brent. I absolutely do.
Who looks like the fool then?
Yeah.
Well, it's obvious. It's the West. It's the U.S. Everybody.
Yep, and he knows exactly what our response is going to be, not just the United States, but really NATO, should he choose to actually go live with an invasion. He knows exactly where he stands. And I agree with you. And essentially, he would have that victory at a very minimal cost. He's already feeding his troops. He's already housing his troops. All he had to do was pay for some fuel to move them over there, drive the tanks around a little bit, warm up the oil in them, and then he pulls everything back. I bet in the end it was a fairly minimal cost to pull off what he had done should he choose not to act on Ukraine.
I think he's also got his own population to worry about too. I know last year there were protests in Russia over I believe it was the elections or something like that, but that may be why this is happening too. Putin's trying to boost his popularity. But when you're in kind of a dictatorship, you're fighting a two-front war always. You're watching your own civilian population as well as your enemy. So, and that's another problem with China. China hasn't been in a war since 1979. They've had border conflicts and peacekeeping missions in the Uyghur territory, but they haven't been combat tested. They have no veterans in the CCP army. So, and we have no idea how the Russian population or the Chinese population is going to react if they proceed to go, to war.
That's a great point, Chad. Another thing, if you look over the overall history of China, militarily, China doesn't perform well. They just don't. So their one overall tactic has always just been millions of bodies to throw at the problem. Look at the Korean War, and you look at the Chinese losses versus U.S. losses, and it's a huge imbalance. And you look at the Chinese forces sent versus U.S. forces that fought from 51 to 53, and just staggeringly unbalanced. I mean, by typical military logic of 3-to-1 advantage attacker over defender, Chinese should have steamrolled that whole peninsula, and it didn't happen.
No, it's interesting. I mean, it's the biggest Russian war game, guys, since the early 1980s. Okay, it's been that long. It's been 40 years since Russia has had anything near this large of a war game. But I mean, in fairness, I don't think America's had a war game this size since the late 80s, maybe early 90s. So So
No, it's been a long while since Reforger and Team Spirit.
this was far more than a war game, and China's taking note. What does Putin get at the negotiation table? And again, this is all assuming peace. Peace ensues, right? What does Putin get at the negotiation table for his great big war game? And if she isn't paying attention in China, I'd be absolutely shocked.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, if he gets anything out of this, it's a victory. So
That's good points. What do you got, Bruce? I know you're reading some of these pro-Russian comments.
Well, I don't know how seriously to take some people. So there's some comments here about the Ukrainian AR-15 and 7.62 by 39. No, there's never been a service rifle that's won a war ever. That's not what wins wars. So even if that was the greatest thing since the M1 Garand, that's not going to win or lose a war. The Germans definitely in World War II had the better service rifle with the MP44, STG-44. No one argues that. They didn't win jack. They lost everything. So having an AR and 7.62 by 39 is not going to win the war. Secondly, all the footage that I've seen out of Ukraine, they're primarily still running AKs. They're running them in 7.62 by 39, AKM variants of some sort or another. That seems to be the weapon of choice over there. We've said this before. Sure, when given the opportunity, former COMBLOC or COMBLOC countries love the AR-15. But there's not going to be enough of them over there, and that's not going to win a war. That's not even going to win a battle. It comes down to the fortitude of the troops and logistics behind the troops, the support that they have. It's not about the individual weapon that you have. And I'm sure you're probably not from this country, but you almost sound like an American when you think that the weapon that you have is going to win your battle. It's just not, it's not reality. But we have a lot of Americans that think that too, because they have some cool $3,000 weapon in their closet that they're set for any type of conflict that they have with another person. That's fantasy land. But go on thinking that. And the other comment, I'll just say this, talking about American aggression. Have you seen our president? I mean, there's no American aggression. I mean, I'm sorry. Again, I'll tell you that I would put our military against any military if you let the generals run the military. We haven't done that since definitely before Vietnam, maybe Korea. And I'm not sure we've won a war since then. So let's put those two things together. But we don't have tanks lined up on any border anywhere. We can't even secure our own southern border. That guy right there is not about to go toe-to-toe with Putin. He's not going to go toe-to-toe with anybody, all right? He can't even find his way out of his bedroom in the morning. So, no, we're not the aggressors here. I'm not sure where you guys are getting that from or what newsreel from the 1940s you're watching. But turn on the news today. Look, go to Yahoo News in the US.com and look at what Americans are talking about. And then come back and tell me that somehow we're the aggressor that's trying to bait Russia into war. That's not reality.
Hey, Bruce, can you go into a little more detail? I wasn't quite clear on your impression of the president. Not sure where you were going with that.
Look, no. I have a professional career, so I try not to be too vocal about my opinion in politics. So you guys, you're just going to have to read between the lines. Plus, there could be children watching, so I'm trying to keep my language.
Yeah, it was thinly. I mean, it was veiled, well veiled. Yeah, we couldn't. Anyway,
yeah, you're kind of rambling there, dude.
The thing is that I'm hearing the most ridiculous claims. Oh my gosh, America just put 3 battalions, right next to the Ukrainian border. No, 3 battalions. Ooh, and they have 1 in Estonia and 1 in Poland. No, say it's not true. We have 5 battalions there. You say 5 battalions. How many Russian battalions are in? I mean, they've got 30,000 troops in Belarus alone. They've got 15,000 Russian troops inside of Ukraine in the eastern provinces. There are 130,000 minimum Russian troops all around the north, the south, and the east of Ukraine. And we've got We've got like 4,600. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Armed with what? Yeah. Yeah. America's the aggressor here. Okay.
I guarantee you, you look at those troops that we've got in those countries, there's no live rounds in their magazines. You know what I mean? It's just you guys in the military, you know how it is. We don't even trust our own guys with loaded weapons until there's some hot war somewhere. It's a shame. I'm not proud of it, but it is what it is. And I saw one of the comments that they said, yeah, we're giving a bunch of anti-tank weapons to Azov. Okay, let's give a bunch of anti-tank weapons to whatever units there are in Ukraine. Let's give every single Ukrainian a tow missile. Okay, that's fine, whatever, right? Guys, if there aren't Russian tanks lined up on the border, there's nothing for them to shoot. Are you insinuating that Ukraine is getting ready to invade Russia? That is not happening. That's just not going to happen. Defensive weapons are very different from lining up tanks somewhere on the border with aircraft and 100,000 troops with invasion plans. Everyone in Ukraine could have some type of anti-tank weapon. If there's no enemy tanks in Ukraine, that's not aggressive, guys. I'm sorry, but I'm just not buying it.
Yeah. I mean, what you're going to see is a whole bunch of like Ukrainians after this whole thing settles down, and they're going to be trying to rob taxi cabs with javelin missiles. All right, buddy. What?
Hey, it would just be their equivalent of Chicago. I mean, that's not really that big of a deal.
All right. So on this weapon system topic of conversation, so we've seen a lot of anti-tank weapons, whether that's the form of javelins or tows or whatever, going into the Ukraine as aid. You don't see much about anti-aircraft though. I did see an article about, I think Romania sent some anti-aircraft missiles or something. Like those have got to be some like SA2 Cold War era stuff. Like we're talking about a professional, like first world Air Force. I mean, they can have all the javelins and anti-tank weapons they want. What are they doing about anti-air?
Yeah, Romania has like a goodwill of military, and they're like, just send that stuff to the Ukraine. We're not even selling it here. It's old timey stuff. But I agree. Look, if we're going to send them, I have no problem. And I will say this on my position: I fully support the U.S. arming Ukraine to the teeth with anti-tank weapons and anti-air weapons. I think that here's the thing, man. Here's the thing that I think. I think going back to the Russian Afghanistan invasion, when we started arming the Mujahideen to fight the Soviets, I think that after that, we realized that we had some Stinger missile systems floating around out there. And if they got in the wrong hands, they could take down a jetliner. And I'm telling you, I think that scared the holy hell out of a lot of American and government officials. And I think that we have maybe secretly, because I've never heard it posted publicly, but have said, we don't want a bunch of anti-air missiles floating around in a country that may be unstable, that may sell those weapons, that may have those weapons stolen that we can't control. And I think that's one of the big fears that we have. And I don't know if you guys have seen earlier on in the war against Ukraine when the Soviets shot down that airliner coming from Malaysia, and all those photos of those bodies of those civilians on the ground, knowing that plane broke apart at 30,000 feet and many of them fell to their death. It's not something that I think we, the American people, not me, but we, the American people, are wanting to be a part of. And I think, Brent, maybe that may be why we would send advisors over there with anti-aircraft capabilities and training capabilities, but we're not shipping crates of Stingers to Ukraine or anywhere else for that matter.
So that's exactly what I was thinking, Bruce. I was thinking the reason we're not seeing Patriot batteries and everything else coming over there is because these things have very high altitude. And you're right. It was the shoot down. It was the Russia gave the Eastern militia, the pro-Russian militia, anti-aircraft and some serious anti-aircraft, right? And they shot down the Malaysian Airlines. And I think that's exactly it, and probably well advised that we don't give them operational and strategic level anti-aircraft. At the same time, I'm a bit dismayed that we're not handing them Stinger missiles. These are tactical Manpads what's their ceiling? Something like 10,000, 12,000 feet? That's if it's right above you, right?
That's really low. That's helicopters and that's ground attack aircraft.
Exactly.
Yeah, but if you remember in history, guys, it was a Russian SA-7, the predecessor to the Stinger, that took down a Rhodesian airliner in the 70s. So there's precedence that those type of missiles have been used. And remember there was a big fear in the 80s that the IRA had somehow got their hands on Red Eyes and Stingers. That was kind of a big thing in the 80s.
And there was the DHL in Iraq. Remember the DHL cargo plane that got hit by an SA-7 Grail and all this. So that's very real when they're coming in low. But what I'm saying is when you're flying at 30,000, 40,000 feet, it's just a Stinger can't get that high. And it can't get that. And even at, like I said, even at its peak, what you got to realize is even at its peak altitude, any of those Manpad, man-portable, they can't do that 10 miles away and get that level of, so it's a very limited space. But as you said, it's really about tactical. And so I've been a bit dismayed that we haven't given some of those.
I can understand why we haven't, because they won't stay in Ukraine.
Oh yeah,
we won't stay in Ukraine, and then they show up in Germany.
My understanding is,
in Sweden.
at least rumor is that they are making it there, Brent and Les, but they absolutely are. But they're not coming from us. They're coming from basically the Baltic states. Estonia, maybe Poland. We don't know. Point is that some of the other NATO allies are supposedly getting Manpads into the theater.
And it's not uncommon. I'm not saying we're doing this, but I certainly am insinuating that we might be, that the CIA gets involved and all of a sudden a ship full of U.S. made weapons show up over there with the little American flag painted over and some other country's insignia put on it. Guys, that's been happening forever. Anyone that's a weapons collector has something that has been marked over to hide the source of country that it's from. So, and it may not be quite that simple, but it could be that the CIA goes to Romania, finds that warehouse full of old anti-aircraft stuff, and then finds a way to route it into Ukraine with a dubious original orientation that it came from, or origin that it came from. So I wouldn't be surprised one bit. I wouldn't bet $5 one way or the other on something like that.
The thing is, though, is if they were getting these Manpads, I would think that they would be showing or showcasing that stuff on their, newsreels, right? Because that's all we've seen is training, Ukrainian soldiers in like snow ghillie suits with freaking javelins, training. Like they're obviously putting this out there to try to deter the Russians, right? Because obviously the Russians have a lot of tanks and armor assets. So you would think that if they had that anti-aircraft capability, they would show like guys out there with these, Stingers or, other Manpads, like practicing to take down Soviet or Russian helicopters and aircraft. But they're not. I mean, I haven't seen one yet.
Unless it was being sent there by the CIA or some other covert group that said, we're sending you all this stuff, but keep your whore mouth shut about it.
I love it when Bruce uses technical terms.
That's a procurement term. It's a part of the procurement term, your whore mouth. Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing is that even Ukraine would, the military would recognize that while these are a tactical weapon system, they have an operational impact. They may have a strategic impact. And so I would assume that they would keep a tighter grip on them, and that you wouldn't just see these everywhere. But I don't know. I will say this, though, Bruce, so there's a long story there. But one time when I was in Iraq, we disrupted one of the mortar attempts, and we found the cache, and we dug it all up. So I got to be part of there, and you see me stand there holding these 120 millimeter mortar rounds. And so, you can clearly see the Russian stuff. And then I said, and you can clearly see the American stuff. And I wouldn't know the difference. And I'm military, and the EOD, two of the EOD specialists came over there and they're like, hey, no, man, that's not American made. I was like, the hell, it isn't. OD green, yellow, HE. It's got all of our markings and everything. And, there you go. And the point here is, Look at that. Yeah, that's what I was hearing. I was hearing the same thing, that they were, that Lithuania and that Estonia and possibly Poland were sending anti-aircraft to Ukraine. Anyway, point is here, long story short, who was making these rounds? And it was France. France makes two types of munition, the stuff marked in the French way, and then they make the English spelling, and they do everything to make it look like American munitions. And I'm like, wait, what? Why would France do that? Well, because the arms market is good. And there's plausible deniability when you build munitions, that military munitions, that look just like and mark just like the American stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it's funny that you brought that up. That's what I remember is like, well, it wouldn't be the first time.
And I wouldn't discount anything munition-wise coming out of France. Now, I'll be the first one to make fun of France and their military capabilities all day long. But I believe the Exocet missile is French. You don't want to fuck with that.
I'd also point out the fact that, the French were the ones to stand up to the Russians after Crimea, because the French were building two huge assault ships for the Russian Navy, and the French pretty much stuck the middle finger up, took a hell of a loss on the deal, and ended up pulling the ships back from the Russians and eventually selling them to the Egyptians. So the French have always stood up to the Russians. So it wouldn't surprise me that they would be arming the Ukrainians. And as far as the Lithuanian and Estonia going, that might be some backdoor stuff with us going, hey, clean out your armories of the old Soviet stuff, and we'll send you all our brand new stuff. And I bet you there's somebody telling Vlad, hey, look what these guys are getting. So that might be part of the calculus too. But we're just spitballing here.
What you got, Chad?
I don't really have a whole lot to add to that. I think bottom line, just to kind of, close this up, I guess, from my end, at least anyway, is Ukraine is fighting for its survival. Russia is fighting for its leader's ego. We'll see how far that gets them if they do actually invade. Again, Ukraine, pretty impressive. They're preparing for total war, it seems like, at least from the Western media that I've seen. When you got grandma holding an AK-47, shooting rounds down range, that says quite a bit about their state of mind. Sun Tzu said, put your men on death ground and they'll fight to the last man. It seems like that's the route they're taking. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. As far as the air stuff goes, I don't think Russia relies on its air power as much as we do. They're probably going to rely more on their artillery. I think someone had said that in the comments, and I completely agree. They're going to fight a ground war. They always have, and that's kind of where they've excelled in the past, at least. So I'm not sure they're going to rely too much on their air force. We'll see, though.
I agree with that.
Let's talk about that. So if this invasion does kick off, what's it going to look like?
I agree with Chad. I think that air power, this precision pinpoint laser guided bombs from aircraft is not something you're going to see Russia using a lot of. I'll come back and say I'm wrong if I'm wrong, but they haven't done it up until this point. They're not using a lot of attack helicopters either. They're just not. Like Chad said, they're moving ground troops forward. They're using artillery. And the thing about artillery is the type of artillery that Russia's using is not weather dependent. I'm not an artillery guy, but maybe some of you are. But you tell me, if it's snowing, does artillery care? If it's raining, does artillery care? You can't get ground attack aircraft up. You can't get helicopters up. But by God, you can fire a shot off using a mathematical equation from artillery and have it land on a grid on a map. And I think that's what they're using a lot of, simply because it's reliable in harsh conditions. And Russia has an unlimited amount of it. There's no doubt about that. Ukraine has a lot of it too. And Ukraine has counter artillery. And there are actually battles that go on where it's artillery versus artillery. They're using a lot of drones, and drones are fantastic for artillery. Fly your little drone over, you fire a barrage, you adjust fire, and you can see if there's activity in the trenches or in any kind of fixed positions, and adjust fire on the artillery to hit those. And it's so common. If you guys are watching footage out of Ukraine on the Ukrainian side, They're in trenches and they've always got an out for drones, and they are trying to shoot down those drones because those drones will see movement in those trenches, and bet your bottom dollar an artillery barrage lands a short while after. And artillery, in my opinion, in a environment like that is still king, guys. It's absolutely king.
But they're gonna have to have a significant amount of air power, because we know the Ukrainians bought a bunch of Turkish drones. So it's like this isn't a one-sided fight when it comes to like drone warfare and whatnot, because we know the Ukrainians have drones. So there's definitely going to be some sort of Russian anti-aircraft and air power involved significantly, in my opinion.
Well, here's something else you got to think about. They're fighting the entire population. You know, if they just go around bombing shit, they're going to, you know, make enemies everywhere. Kind of like we did in Afghanistan and Iraq when we bombed the wrong thing, hit the wrong thing. So, you know, it's kind of indiscriminate when you're dropping air power. They don't have the over-reliance on Air Force is kind of uniquely an American thing. And I think we're all kind of thinking like Americans that, you know, hey, we'll send our air power over there and we'll just destroy everything. I don't think the Russians act that way. I don't think at least they haven't historically. You know, they tried that in Afghanistan back in the 70s and it didn't fare too well for them.
Yeah, also, Russia tried a surgical strike, a very Western style surgical strike in, what was that, 94, as they rolled into Chechnya. And of course, it went just abysmally bad for them. So you notice that when they came back 6 years later, they rolled in on Grozny, stopped outside of Grozny on the high ground, laid siege to the city, and shelled it into the Dark Ages. So you asked me what it looks like. I mean, it's no big surprise. I think just the most sound thing would be a feign attack from the south, from the ocean. You know, I don't even know that they need to hit the beach. They just need to make sure everybody believes they're going to hit the beach. You do a press from the militia group in the east, but your big thing is a hook from a press from the north, from Belarus, because that's closest to Kiev, and you want to drive as fast as you possibly can to Kiev and then lay siege to it. And artillery plays the role here. Again, it's not necessarily to destroy Ukraine. That's not what Russia's looking to do, and it would cost them so much to do that. I think it's to take the capital by storm, lay siege to it, artillery barrage it until they acquiesce, and then, negotiate for whatever you want. I mean, that's if it came to a fighting war, that's just kind of the no-brainer move, isn't it?
Yeah, it ultimately comes down to what Vlad wants out of the deal. I mean, there's a lot to be said that he might just move up and take territory up to the next river line, which gives him a land access to Crimea and stuff. Or if he wants the whole enchilada, then yeah, going straight for Kiev makes sense. Be an interesting battle, because if all these Ukrainians are now armed and they turn the city into just a big old festoon fort and stuff, that's a people eater, and he could lose a lot of people in that city. Personally, I don't think Vlad's the kind of guy that cares about losing a lot of people, but I mean, we'll see.
I don't know. Like I said, Chechens kind of handed Russians their, tail end. What was that? Some 35 years ago, or I guess 26 years ago, whatever it was. But the point is that I don't see the Russians, especially knowing how many javelins and all the anti-armor that's come into. That's really was the deciding factor in Grozny in Grozny back in 94, was the prevalence of and proliferation of anti-armor. And so you see that again in Ukraine. And again, it was still there in 2000. Russia learned its lesson. And, it doesn't, they don't have the qualms that America has about, laying bases of fire sacks and, and saturation bombing and all of those things. And it worked well. Let's be honest. In 2000, 1999, 2000, Russia came back and took Chechnya back. Chechnya had a very short-lived, autonomy.
Yeah, we got to remember though, it's not the same. Even going back to the Georgian invasion, it's a more developed Russian military, and they've had a lot of success in Syria. They had a complete revamp of their armed forces. I mean, this is a Russian soldier right now. All right. Right there. I mean, it's a different ball game. I'm going to pull up another one. Give me 1 second. Boom. Those are what Russian troops look like nowadays. They have significantly modernized their military, and they have done numerous surgical strikes in Syria. So they do have a lot of the same type of capabilities. Now they don't have nearly as much combat experience as we have, but they aren't fighting us. They're fighting Ukrainians, and Ukrainians have had a lot of experience fighting on the ground, against a somewhat of a peer threat. But they haven't fought against a developed nation like Russia, at least not on a grand scale.
I think all they have to do strategically, though, is just prolong the war. If they fight a protracted war, I think eventually Russia's going to say, "Screw this! It's not worth it." Just like they did elsewhere in Afghanistan. Again, Ukraine is fighting for its survival. Russia is fighting for its leader's ego. So, Ukrainian nationalism is going to win the day. It really depends on how strong they want to resist and how far they want to go with this, and how motivated the population is to fight. That's what this is all going to boil down to.
Hey, Human SVD, I see your comment saying what Russia is very combat experienced. People get out of the military. It's not the same freaking army that fought in World War II and every other little war that Russia has had along the way. All right. You have people come in and then they get out. Right now, U.S. military has, the senior levels, even on the enlisted side, you still have numerous combat veterans, lots of experience fighting global war and terrorism. That's what I'm talking about right now. How many Russian troops have actually seen combat in Syria or, the undercover war in Ukraine? There's probably not very many of them. Most of them are green troops, never seen combat. They've only been training.
That's absolutely true, Brent. And Russia is not the Russia of World War II any more than the United States is the United States of World War II. Russia lost in Afghanistan. They could have sent more troops there. They could have overwhelmed that country. They could have maintained an occupation in that country. But the people, the civilians of Russia, the mothers, the fathers, they turned against that war after a while. It will be faster now than it was then. That's the problem with the United States because of quick communications and us understanding how quickly we lose troops and how ugly it is. There are mothers in Russia now that are on their same telephones getting 4K video. They can have that from the front immediately. I was watching a video not that long ago where some Ukrainians attacked a Russian small emplacement in the snow. The Russians kicked their ass, killed a bunch of them, pulled the cell phone off one of the dead kids, looked up mom and called mom and said, "Hey, just so you know, your son's here. He's dead. And, they attacked us and we killed him." And mom was like, of course, distraught. They spoke the same language. She asked that they look after his body. They couldn't guarantee what they could do with his body, but they wanted her to know what had happened to him and for her to let other people know, other Ukrainian moms know what's going on over there. That's immediate real-time information that at best would travel by a letter in World War II, would go through Russian hands and be filtered before it got anywhere. It's from one soldier to the mother of a dead soldier immediately now. So communication, I think, is one of the weaknesses that we've had in the United States. It's one of the reasons we lost the Vietnam War, but it's also one of the reasons that Russia's lost Afghanistan. And I'm going to tell you that if you go and invade Ukraine, and like Chad said, it ends up being protracted. Your window is much shorter than it would have been in World War II, and the lives that will be lost of Russian troops is much lower than it would have been in World War II as well, because the people simply will turn against it. Putin is running a popularity contest. He's no Stalin. Don't let that fall on deaf ears.
We got a follow-up?
It's hard to follow Bruce.
Well, we might be wrapping up, or we can talk a little bit about Canada and the truckers.
Yeah, let's talk about our Canadian friends.
All right, take it.
All right. Well, the big news up there is for the first time in Canada's history, the Premier has evoked the Emergency Act. And while he said that he has no intention of using the military, what it does give them the power to do is seize everybody's asset. It gives the local police their federal powers. They literally have the right to seize your property, cancel your insurance, take your money. They can literally erase you as a human being, basically. There's been lots of talk of where this could go. And I'm like, that's a scary place to go. I mean, Trudeau has not even attempted to talk to the truckers. And the interesting thing is, it's funny, the mayor of Ottawa went and talked to the truckers, and they're like, yeah, okay, we'll leave the residential neighborhoods alone, and we'll just clear. So they're clearly being reasonable. And when things could have gotten violent, like at the Ambassador Bridge, they didn't. At the border crossing at Coots, they could have gotten violent. And the cops and the protesters had a hug fest. I was watching the video on it today. They sang the Canadian national anthem together and hugged each other, And then for Trudeau to go this place, I mean, it just makes no fucking sense whatsoever.
I could be wrong on this because, I don't know my Canadian history as much as, the political history, particularly as much as I should. But I thought Trudeau's father also invoked the Emergency Act. I thought this is the second time in Canada's history, like father, like son. So I thought, but whatever the case there, I think the really inspiring and compelling story behind the trucker revolt here in Canada is the decorum that you were alluding to, Les. The fact that they've kept it so peaceful and yet stayed firm in their resolve. It's definitely an inspiration. And, I mean, we're probably on the verge of giving Canada credit for the rain at this point, because the reality was that in Europe and Asia and other places in Australia, there were already protests. Hell, there were protests here in America. There are already protests against, COVID restrictions and mandated vaccinations and you name it, and passports to be able to go and have a normal life and making second-class citizens. New Zealand's prime minister called everybody who wasn't. She said, yeah, they're second-class citizens. So, the whole world is tired of this. We're done with this. But I will say that, the magnitude, given their population and everything else, the magnitude, the effectiveness of the Canadian convoy, trucker convoy, and the fact that they have kept so peaceful, even jovial, and like you said, friendly, like, oh, that's residential. We won't mess with that. Here's the cops. We're not angry at you. Cops coming back going, not angry at you either. Thank you for being peaceful. You look at the Canadians, and this is embarrassing as Americans. We should all feel this deeply. And you look at Antifa and BLM protests for 5 years that burned cities and killed. What was it the BBC reported? They reported, I think they said 49 deaths, killings associated with BLM and Antifa riots in that 5-year period. I mean, this is horrific, and God knows the property damage. And you look at what the Canadians are doing and inspiring, who they're inspiring around the world. It's heartwarming. It's heartwarming. Yeah, and I'm not even talking about Trudeau, but you're right. Trudeau has proven himself time and time again to be an elitist. He's proven himself time and time again to be a racist bigot. And now, when people dare, when his own, peasants, the Canadian citizenry dare to disagree with him, just disagree with the man, for crying out loud, he enacts the national emergencies. I mean, come on. He's not my president. It's not my, circus, not my monkeys, but that man needs to go. And when he leaves, he can take Biden by the hand and please exit with Biden. They can go somewhere together.
Yeah, I I think we as Americans, I know I do, kind of have a hard time understanding someone like a leader like Trudeau creating a national emergency over a truly peaceful protest. Now, we will eventually do it, sometimes maybe, when enough people are dying, enough buildings burn, maybe. But in the United States, I can't think of a time where we've ever done that, not since Vietnam, over a truly peaceful protest. Yeah, this comment below, truck protests would mean nothing here besides solidarity of Canada because we already 75% open. I kind of agree with that. I totally see what the truckers in Canada are doing. They're basically saying, look, why should I, as a trucker who spends my life in my truck, fueling up my truck, hauling stuff back and forth, why should I be vaccinated? And I don't know anything about truckers in Canada, but I know a lot about truckers here in the United States. And they are typically kind of a different breed of people, both male and female. They're a little rough around the edges. They're hardworking people. They spend their time away from their families on the road. I deal with truckers every day. Here in the United States, I don't know if you guys fully realize, some of you in chat, but this COVID thing's kind of over with. There's a few states that are still holdouts, a few cities. We've talked about this before. The face diaper mask thing, it's over with. The mask mandate, that's a done deal. Even it went all the way up to our Supreme Court. And they said, look, people don't have to get vaccinated. You can't make people get vaccinated. Yes, there are groups of people that do, military, those working in hospitals, but for the vast majority of free Americans, they don't have to get vaccinated. That kind of killed the deal. And people only have so much of an envelope to deal with all this life-changing bullshit, and they're done with it. And every day they get more and more and more done with it. And that's why you see even some liberal cities, some liberal states saying we're rolling back the mandates, even though that the administration, the federal administration, isn't on board with it. States and locals are going, we ain't getting reelected if we keep this shit up. And elections are everything because that's their free ride, right? That's their government tit to keep them fed full of milk. So they're done with it. And I think that we're going to continue to see it decline. I don't know what mandates have been put on truckers here in the United States. I'm not aware of any. I could be wrong. But I think that, again, I don't really know what truckers would be protesting. And those of you in the chat, maybe if you're a trucker and you've been wrong somehow, post it up because you can teach me. But I don't know what the truckers here in the United States would be protesting, short of just being in solidarity with those Canadians. And I'll tell you this, I'll be real careful as any kind of trucker protest. And I'll say this, any kind of protest whatsoever in the U.S. You start blocking streets in the U.S., you start pissing off everybody that you want to support you, including myself. I got to get to work on time. I give myself about a 5-minute window there to be at work on time. If you make me late, we're going to have problems.
Well, there's a difference in the thing. The Canadian mandates and everything are more sweeping because here in the U.S., it could be you could do one thing in Virginia and something completely different in California. Or the best example, Florida is staying completely open and for the most part, in California having absolutely draconian lockdowns. Canada was more uniform across the board because it was dictated from the government. So that's why I think the protest up there is being more widespread. Also, they have the restriction up there for the cross-border truckers, vaccinated or not. The moment you come back across the border, 14 days of quarantine. You cannot run a business where you have to take off every 2 weeks after a day's work. So that's one of the things they're protesting. That's a big deal. There is a lot of effects coming out of it. That a lot of the stuff I send to Canada here in my logistics business is at a halt right now. It's going nowhere. And I find it interesting that while it's the truckers that have done this up there, and you can have a convoy 50 miles long of trucks at one point, so that's a lot of truckers. Overall population, that's very little. But despite what the news is telling you, they're getting a lot of support. The Canadian mainstream media, the CBC and the CBT, I think the other one is, they're just like our mainstream news media. They're anti-trucker, and most of the people in the comment sections are anti-trucker. Every other thing you can find is the average Canadian seems to be supporting this. up to and pointing today, the Ottawa police chief resigned over this emergency act, saying that it was not constitutional. I've also seen videos from an active service Canadian major saying that he does not support what the government's doing, what is wrong, and that he's calling on the military to not respond. And I've seen several Canadian veterans groups, calling on each other to stand up to the government. And I actually love the video about the veterans who showed up at the Canadian War Memorial and removed the barriers and basically told the cops, "We'll guard our own memorial," which I thought was just freaking awesome. So yeah, there's a lot of support among the common people, like to keep the trucks fuel. People just started showing up with fuel. And when the police started to confiscate the fuel, they showed up with empties to have so many to confuse the police. Or another good one is when they brought fuel in a horse-drawn wagon.
Right. Well, this isn't about trucking, and this isn't about inconvenience, guys. Come on, see the bigger picture. This is about, does a government have the right to tell you what to do with your own body, with your own health? If they say, "Hey, I'm sorry, we don't have enough to feed, we're going to kill off 20%. We're just going to murder you. We're going to murder you and your children or anything else." If they have a little bit of control over your body, yourself, the very essence of who you are, then they have a lot of control. And so this whole thing about, no, I can make you get vaccinated. I can make you get unvaccinated. I can make you do anything. I can lock you in your homes. I can lock you in your homes for 2 years at a time. I can shut down your businesses. I can shut down all of your human rights. I mean, come on, guys. This isn't about inconvenience. And yes, we've had it much easier here in the United States than most of the other countries. And that's why you're seeing this. I mean, look at the draconian crap that was going on in New Zealand and Australia, of all places. I mean, Germany and Austria did the whole Sieg Heil thing. I mean, I don't think anybody was surprised when they said, "We are the National Socialists against COVID." And we all went, "Well, there goes Germany again." Yeah. But come on. When New Zealand, when the Anzacs did it, whoa. And when the Canadians came and did it, that's just mortifying. It's mortifying. I mean, UK has said, we don't care anymore. This is done. Now, if we want to talk about it on a convenience level, which I don't, but if we want to talk it on a convenience level, well, it's not convenient for me. All right, well, then I'll say this. The bubonic plague ran its course in 2 years. The Chinese flu in the late 60s ran its course in 2 years. The Spanish flu in the late 19 teens ran its course in 2 years. These things tend to run their course in 2 years. We're over the 2-year mark. Get over it. Let's go. Jesus Christ.
Who else is surprised that it's Canada leading the way, though? I mean, come on. Who saw that coming?
Fair enough. That's a really good point, right?
That's a good point, but it goes to show you can only push people so far. I would also point out in both world wars, certain Canadian units like the PPCLI have incredibly savage reputations. So there's a mean streak in the Canadians. So it's you just got to push real far to find it.
Well, I will say I think that we're starting to kind of see the tail end of this, and I think it's politically strategic because I guarantee before the midterms, the Democrat Party is going to drop all this vaccine crap because they know it's a losing issue. And you already got New Jersey that's talking about doing away with mandates. I mean, that's as blue as they come up there. So
yeah, I just hope that maybe some of that forward movement in the right direction, Chad, here in the United States can move to our northern neighbors and can cause them to start rolling back some of their mandates as well. Doesn't look like the government up there is interested in doing that at all, but hopefully something will happen and we'll make it catch on. I mean, I know here in the United States, it's really been a great social experiment. Probably look back on it 100 years from now and talk about how much we learned from it. Because you've got states like Florida that have like no mandates and states like California that have mandates where they've got kids in 3 masks, but the hospitalization rate, death rate is really no better in California than it is in Florida. So what have we learned in this great social experiment, without getting down into the fine, minute details, is that being a free society or being an extremely restricted society doesn't really have an impact on the death rate. So that's the science of it, man. Those are the bare numbers. And that's why you don't see stations like CNN, MSNBC promoting those numbers. They don't even talk about it because they've just moved on to the next story. They're like done with it. And anytime that they get it wrong, they just move on to the next story. They never come back and go, hey, we got it wrong. I think that's what's going on, here in the United States. Hopefully, maybe through some miracle, it'll become contagious. Canadians will start seeing the same information, the same data. And look, the Canadian government is responsible to the voters of Canada, just like our government is responsible to the people of America. And when the soccer moms start pushing back that normally would support these leftist agendas and supported them in the beginning, and they go, hey, look, this just isn't working for us anymore. We even see our leftist leaderships, like in New Jersey, having to be responsive to that and having to go, hey, we have to roll it back or we're going to be out of a job because they'll just vote us out. Hopefully the same thing will happen with Canada. I don't know anything about Canadians. I don't know if there's enough up there with the trucker mentality to vote those people out of office, get them out, and reset the government up there. But I hope that there is.
Hey, we can all just look at communist China, right? Communist China is the epitome of what the left wants to do in terms of COVID restrictions. Lock everybody up in their house, make them wear freaking 20 masks, and everybody's mandatory has to get the vaccine. Is there still COVID in China? Okay. So there you go. There's your science right there. You have side-by-side case studies going on all over the world. And now we got 2 years of freaking research that shows that all of this bullshit was for nothing. It was absolutely for nothing. And people are so heavily invested in following these bullcrap COVID restriction guidance garbage that they're afraid to admit that it was all BS. And that's why it keeps going.
DJ, one of the commenters, DJ, said it was never about, he's saying it was always about control. And it was never about, COVID or recovery or anything like that. And I don't know, that's fairly cynical, probably correct. But it's pretty cynical. And so I'm going to jump on that cynicism and say, yeah, I mean, it was about control. And it was control of fear. Fear was a virtue. And so, hey, who can be the most afraid? The only problem with that is talking about the plague. I'm pretty sure the villages that were wiped off the face of the planet were also afraid of the bubonic plague, the Black Death, and they still died. Being afraid doesn't make you survive, and being afraid doesn't make you, thrive. And so, yeah, fear is the tool. DJ's right back at it, and I agree. This was an effort of, and you said it, Brent. You already said it. It's what the leftists, the progressive leftists want. They are Marxists. They follow Marxist ideologies. They follow Marxist practice. And of course, fear is how you rule them.
Look at this communist mouthpiece right here.
Well, that's fair, because our 900 million, no matter who died in that time, or 900,000, it didn't matter if you died falling off a ladder. Oh, you died of COVID. And China does not include their 4,600 deaths, the number that they rounded up, put into camps, and exterminated.
Yeah, I'm not gonna trust the Chinese media coming out with numbers at all. I guarantee that's not a real number. So communists lie. So whatever.
Well, Chad, I think the only nation on the planet telling the truth about their number of COVID cases is North Korea, because I don't think they get above 1.
Chad, I wouldn't trust our numbers either. Just like Doc.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Just like Doc said, you could be in a car accident and be beheaded. They'll COVID test you, and by God, if you test positive, that's a COVID death.
That guy reminds me of the NBC when they had the Olympics opening ceremonies and stuff. There was one guy that was like, "Oh, look, they have a Uyghur, in their opening ceremony, like all these Uyghur, oppression things that you're hearing are all false because they have a Uyghur out here.
The token Uyghur.
Token.
But I will say this, Bruce, to go back to your point about, the differences between the states. Thank God we live in a federalist system where the left can go where they want to go and the right can go where they want to go. This kind of federalizing of everything, where the federal government, Big Brother, is trying to push everything down. That's how civil wars start, and we can go all on that tangent if we want. But thank God we live in the type of federalist system that we do.
No, I agree. I can sit down with a bleeding heart liberal across from me, and I can get that bleeding heart liberal to agree with me that states' rights is a great thing, because they can go to their state and they can wear their pajamas all day long, and they can drink their soy milkshakes, and they can wear their 3 masks, and they can get 4 shots, and I don't care, bro. If that's your thing, tell your parents. I said it's okay. Do it. I'm good. I'll let you live and let live, and leave me the hell alone in my state. I mean, I tell people, if you just can't stand something about your state, if there's something that every day you're depressed about, man, that's cool, because you've got 49 other states that you can move to. And if none of those suit you well, you've got hundreds of other countries. You are simply a plane flight away. If you think that there's a better system of government, if you think that there's someone that's treating COVID better, if you think that some other country, whatever it is, they've got better music, they've got more people that are the same color as you, whatever it is, you are nothing more than a plane flight away to be in your paradise, your utopia. Head over there, knock yourself out.
Yeah, the only problem with that, Bruce, is once their little utopia starts falling apart, then they look at places like Texas and like, well, Texas just is great economy, and like, obviously I'm the ambassador. I need to go there and show them the light and show them the way, because my place is falling apart.
That's my sarcasm. There's a reason they're still here. It's the best country in the world. They're a $400 plane ticket away from anywhere they want to be. You like the way things North Korea are going? Head to North Korea. See how it works for you. You like the things, you like the way it's going on in Africa? They'll give you a couple of choices over there. Short sleeve, long sleeve. They'll chop your arms off. It's brutal everywhere else. And if that's the reason you're still here. You think things are better in Africa? Go to Africa. You think things are better in the Middle East? You want to go to Afghanistan and preach women's rights? Knock yourself out. You're going to get stoned to death, or you're going to get tied to a chair, thrown off the top of a building, or any number of horrific things that happen to people all over the world. The truth is, the reasons that they are able to even have the beliefs that they have is because they live in a country called the United States, where the majority of us tolerate that bullshit.
Man, I'll tell you what, that's absolutely right. And I'll go against the other side too. I'm so, I often go against the Marxists. Hey, let me go to the other, extreme right of it, all the anarchists, right? I'm an, anarchist capitalist, and the whole world, if they just give up government, would be fine. I'm like, okay. But the problem is, that's not my lived experiences. I've been to some of those armpits in different continents, and I'll name them if you want. But the fact is, when I look and I say, hey, why can't you get your vegetables from your village to the next village over? And they're like, well, we can, half the year. But when the rainy season comes, there's no roads. Ooh, my roads, my roads. The anarchists love to talk like, ooh, my roads. Without a government, there's no roads. Roads were invented by the government, you jackass. Rome and China and in Egypt, they're the ones who standardized all of this. And oh, by the way, so I went to your countries that don't have strong governments, that are run by warlords and gang lords and drug lords. They don't have roads. Where's your bridges, man? Where's your bridges over the river? I'll tell you, if you have a bridge, one, they stole it, and secondly, it's a warlord, and you ain't getting over that bridge with your goods unless they like you or you bribe them. So, you know what? You're right. You're absolutely right, Bruce. And it's not just to the leftists. Let's take the rightists, you know, all the extreme right, and say, oh, is that what you want? You're a $400 ticket away from it, brother. Get your happy ass over there. And God bless you. God bless you for following that rainbow that you think exists. It's a pot of gold for you waiting, $400 ticket away. Go for it.
All right.
Good
Well,
one, Doc.
I think we've segued out of Canadian truckers, and I think we've covered Russia and Ukraine pretty well. So I think this is probably a good stopping place. Let's go around the horn. Final thoughts.
Wait, one more. And this gets back to what Bruce said at the beginning of this whole thing. Bruce, also, for those guys that invested in that $3,000 rifle that think that they can take on the entire world with it, they too have places in this world that they can go to and prove us all wrong.
Look, I love those guys. I love those guys. Many of those guys are my friends. Many more of those guys are internet acquaintances. It is America, but until you've lived in a country where you've been truly faced with horrific and challenging situations, or you at least, like myself, understand what those are and have talked to people about what those are and have let that soak in and try to understand what daily life like that is like, you know, you're very fortunate. We are all very fortunate that we live in this country, and those that are in, say, England or maybe Germany or Canada or any other of first world countries. We are very fortunate. We were born here. We live here, and we don't understand what goes on in the lives for the average person that lives on this planet.
All right, guys, we're going to go around the horn. This is going to be a final thoughts. I prefer if you say something about Ukraine, Russia, because that was the number one topic for kicking this off. And then if you got anything for your channel, be sure to throw that in as well. But going around the horn, clockwise, starting with Les. Take it, brother.
All right. Well, we've had a great discussion about the Ukraine tonight, and the truth is, none of us know what's going to happen. All the obvious signs says Vlad's going to take a stroll through Ukraine, but we don't really know. But in the coming days, whatever happens is going to be interesting, and I got a feeling we'll have another live stream about it. Coming up on my channel, I've got some videos I've been doing recently about some more camouflage stuff and night vision stuff. I hope you all tune in and check it out.
Well, I think you guys pretty well know where I stand on everything tonight. In terms of Ukraine, I guess that Putin's doing a great job of promoting that misinformation, and maybe our government is too. I mean, we were told by our government officially 3 days ago that war between Russia and Ukraine was imminent. Now we're starting to roll that back. This is my surprise face, because my government lies to me every day. I'm not one bit surprised. I don't believe anything that comes out of their mouth. And the problem with that is when they do finally tell the truth, I'm pretty skeptical of that too. In terms of Putin, same thing for him. I don't believe anything that comes out of his mouth. He's playing chess. I'm just a small guy playing checkers. I don't know. But fortunately, it's not on the border of my country. It's somebody else's country. And I hope that you Russians are right, that it's all just a training exercise and he doesn't invade Ukraine. That would be great for the people of the world, and particularly the soldiers of Russia, the soldiers of Ukraine, and the civilians of Ukraine. I hope that you guys are right. I'm truly pulling for you and hoping that you're correct. And like Les said, I'm sure we're going to have another live stream about it. And a week from now or 2 weeks from now, we can talk about any further developments that we've got. In terms of the Canadian truckers, ballsy move. I support you 100%. You guys keep going. Do your thing up there. And I hope that you start to see some movement forward on restrictions being lifted like we have here overall in the United States.
All right. So the Ukraine situation, Russian situation and Chinese situation, I see as greatly unfortunate. I don't know what's going to happen. Like the others have said, I agree. I have no crystal ball, but I do see this as regrettable. It's it's a situation where we've been making great inroads over, 50, 60, 70 years with China, trying to get them to see the benefits of, some of the Western values and capitalism and such. I think we've missed many opportunities with Russia to bring them into the realm. And so I do see this as regrettable. And now everybody's flexing, meaning Russia and China are flexing their muscles, and we're going back to Cold War methods that frankly didn't work that well. And again, kind of heartbreaking. The good news out of all of this mess this last month has been the story out of Canada and, everybody else repeating that. And the irony for me is that both governments, the solution to both of these is sex robots. I mean, if you think about it honestly for a minute, you paratroop just like 100,000 super hot sex robots in behind in Belarus and Russia. And not only will the Russians not invade Ukraine, I think Ukraine will come up willingly into Belarus and Russia. And in Canada, all they had to do was give everybody a couple of super hot, sex robots, and everybody would have stayed home anyway.
I was hoping you'd incorporate that eventually. Anyway, final thoughts. I support Ukraine. I'm somewhat skeptical of an invasion, but in the end, I don't know what's going to happen. The Russian population has experienced some economic prosperity since the fall of communism. Who knows how they're going to react in the long, drawn-out fight. Georgia and Crimea were not long, bloody fights. Chechnya kind of was, and it was kind of unpopular. Ukraine has the potential to be a long, drawn-out war. Again, as I stated before, Ukraine is fighting for its existence. Russia is fighting for its leader's ego. So we'll see how that works for Russia if they actually do step over the LOD there. To the truckers up north, honk honk, and let's go, Brandon.
You guys are killing it tonight, man. All right, so Russia. So from the get-go, I was more of a skeptical individual about the Russians invading Ukraine. And the reason I say that is because if we look at the last recent Russian military actions, they seem to have limited objectives, right? So it's like when they went into Ukraine to take the Crimea, it was like just the Crimea. They didn't push all the way. They could have, and Ukrainians were a lot weaker force back then. But they didn't. They didn't do that. And we look at Georgia. And I'm not 100% spun up on the Georgia and how that all unfolded, but I seem to remember like a certain area that, similar to Crimea, they mostly identified as Russian. And there were some issues there with the Georgians in that particular area, and the Russians went in to essentially annex that area, right? It was a limited objective. It wasn't pushing all the way through the country of Georgia. So with that being said, that is the number one reason why I do not think that there is going to be a massive Russian invasion of Ukraine. But they're massing a hell of a lot of troops, guys. When the United States massed that many troops, we're talking Desert Storm, OIF 1, and we went in, guys. we went in. All right. So it is a significant force. If I was a betting man, which I'm not, but if I was, I would say I'd still going to side on the error that it's not going to happen, because I think Putin has a lot to win by an invasion not happening, right? Because like I said earlier in the stream, if that invasion doesn't happen, he gets to sit back and say, look, I said from the get-go, we're having massive war games, right? And the West is flipping out, and they just make all of the West look like complete and utter morons for flagging, just screaming at the top of their lungs that Russia is about to invade Ukraine. So that's my thoughts. Now, I could be wrong, guys. There is supposed to be an invasion potentially kicking off tomorrow. We'll find out. And if we are, I'll be the first one to admit that, man, I'm surprised. But that's my take on it right now. So if it does kick off, hey, I fucking hope the Ukrainians the best, man. It's going to be a hell of a fight. You guys got a lot on your hands. So segueing into what I got come down to the channel, coming up next, let me backtrack. Something I already posted, guys. I need you all to go there and check it out because the YouTube algorithm is kicking my ass on this one. So much so that I have to resort to stuff like this to get people to go freaking watch it. Winter Forge 2022 video. I posted that the other night, and it's only got, I think it's got right now just under 5,000 views, and that's a big video, and usually it gets 10 to 20,000. So I'm surprised that that's not is doing as well. So please go check that out. And what else I got coming down the pipe is this Sunday. I'm going to do an interview with Major Fred Galvin again. He's not talking about his instance with his unit. He's talking about another instance. You probably already heard about it. MARSOC Marines accused of murdering a U.S. contractor. All right. Those guys, just like Major Galvin's unit was dragged through the mud, those guys are getting dragged through the mud too. And Major Galvin happens to be a big proponent of them. So he's going to come on the stream on Sunday. I'm going to interview him, and he's going to talk about that situation and what we can do to help with that. So that's one thing I'm looking forward to. Other than that, guys, that pretty much wraps it out. Anybody got any saved rounds? No? Nada? All right. Well, that concludes live stream 23, guys. So I appreciate everybody jumping on tonight. I know we had a diverse community here. We had some left-wingers. We had some pro-Russian Putin supporters, and we even had some mouthpiece for the People's Republic of China. So,
and sex robots.
Oh, yeah, and sex robots managed to make it back in the stream tonight. So, all right, guys, that's it. Have a good night.